Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. Or, yo soy Antonio. Vamos caminar y hablar. Viajo en Costa Rica. Después, viajo para 3 meses. Primero Colombia y Ciudad de Guatemala y Ciudad de México y Guadalajara para la boda y Costa Rica antes posible Quito, Ecuador. So that's me making some attempts at speaking Spanish. I'm doing this for a reason. Part of the reason is that in life we face these things, and what we're going to talk about today is fear. And the reason that it's important to talk about fear is because if we're honest with ourselves, fear is really an illusion. And what do I mean by that? Now, what I'm talking about here, folks, is not Newtonian physics where you stand at the top of a cliff and jump off. Okay, there's common sense, and then there's fear, especially fear that is projected to you through your mind. And really, the reason that I bring up the Spanish and speaking Spanish on my video is not because it's not something I've been working on as I've been traveling for the last 3 months. It most definitely has. No, the reason that I bring it up is because, the first few weeks that I traveled, I was nervous a little bit. I was nervous because I knew I wanted to learn the language. My grandparents were from Spain. I didn't learn to speak as a child. I took some Spanish in high school, learned the prerequisite, hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Dónde está el baño? ¿Dónde está cerveza? Yet, the second one doesn't do me any good because I don't drink anymore. But part of the reason that I want to discuss the fear being an illusion is because, fear holds people back from doing a lot of things. And what do I mean by that? Well, think about it. What in your life are you not doing, or have you chosen to not do because you're afraid? For instance, have you chosen not to start that business? Have you chosen not to speak to that person in the cubicle across from you because she's an attractive woman? Have you chosen not to travel to different countries because you were afraid you weren't going to know the language? These are all fears that are created in the mind. And the problem with the fear being created in the mind is it is an illusion. What do I mean by that? Well, here's what I mean. Your mind and your ego always create circumstances and situations that it thinks is going to either keep you safe or keep you at a specific level of elevation within society, whether it's to keep you, looking good and everyone rooting you on, or in some cases, if you do something foolish, to teach you not to do that thing again. But again, remember, it's all an illusion. It's not real. You see, your brain creates that situation. Your brain and your ego, they create the thoughts in there, and then you choose to act based on those thoughts. But what actually happens is once you start to actually realize that every time you fall into a fear state, it a lot of times can cause a freeze or a flee type of a situation where now you're making life decisions based on something that has appeared that has created a fear. I'm going to give you some examples. So again, the last walkabout was 9 months. I went all over Asia, and at first, I felt called on the walkabout to begin with, and the difference in feeling called was I felt like I had to go. And so, and I couldn't explain why. I just knew for about 6 months that it was going to happen. And I didn't think of any of the things like language barrier or anything like that. And really, what occurred was a lot of the countries that I went to, I mean, tourism is a big thing. They get a lot of tourism from England and from Australia. So a lot of places, either they spoke English or the signs and whatnot were in English. Things were more catered or curated a little bit towards, if you spoke English, kind of helping you along the way. The countries that weren't, for instance, like Japan and South Korea, I mean, it was a bit more of a challenge. But since I had been traveling for an extended period of time, it kind of gave me that, let's call it that safety net or understanding that you get when you travel, that confidence that you're going to be able to figure it out. However, on this time around, I felt a little more polished, but part of the reason why is because I was like, well, I think I can understand a little more Spanish. I have a lot of friends, obviously, who speak Spanish. I can understand more, I can read more, and and so from that perspective, I felt more confident. However, what I didn't count on was the fear that popped in of, oh crap, I can't really speak. And so for the first week or so, it was a bit more difficult. There was a little bit more of walking around, going to different places, pointing, and kind of giving a weird look for things like how much does this cost, and or only buying things that I saw on the menu because I knew how much that was. So it were things like that. Simple little things like after you order something and the person behind the counter says algo más, it's like, I have no idea what the hell that means. Pro tip, if someone asks you that, they're asking if you want anything else with your order. But it took me a while to figure that one out. But after about the first week and a half, I started to really discover that, hey, if I'm going to do this, I've got to kind of just put my fear aside and jump in and do it. I've kind of got to just get to a point where I recognize that, hey, things are never going to get easier until I put aside my fears and just jump in and go for it. And by week 3, things completely had changed. Even more so that what I noticed was that, when I travel, I find that because I'm there and I really want to meet people and I really want to experience culture and sample the food, that, most people are very welcoming of that because, for me, I am respectful of their culture and whatnot. And so I always find myself feeling welcomed. However, when I started really trying to speak, boy, something else started to happen, which was really interesting. And that was, not only did people begin to, or continue to welcome me, it was almost as if they were going out of their way because they recognized that I was making a lot of effort to try to learn their language. And they were even more welcoming. And that changed the experience dramatically for me. Then I started feeling less and less uncomfortable going and just starting to kind of have a conversation with somebody out of the blue. Because, I would tell them, hey, I don't speak a lot, but I'm trying to learn. And they would go out of their way to help me. And it really, let's just say it ratcheted my experience up exponentially, meaning suddenly it's, I was really kind of increasing my excitement and joy for the walkabout. I'm going to give you another example. When I first started going through the spiritual awakening, kind of right after I had gotten through the toughest part of the healing journey, it was right before COVID, and I had gotten this, we'll call it a call. It was something in my intuition that said, you need to sell everything you own and give away and sell the stuff that you have and just get out from under it all. And as I started to do this, I was internally questioning like, wow, you worked really hard to get all this stuff. And then when you're trying to sell this stuff, you recognize that, holy cow, like, some of the stuff that I seemed like I spent a lot of money on, it just, there's no, I'm not getting any kind of a return on it. And, then people around me started asking me, are you okay? What's going on? Why are you doing this? And, people around me thought, are you going crazy? Like, why are you selling your stuff? And I just knew that something inside of me told me that this is something that I needed to do. So I didn't listen to everybody. So I didn't listen to my ego. I didn't listen to the people around me. And I just continued on my journey of shedding all of this stuff that I had acquired over all of the many years. And complete, from a completely vulnerable space, I don't regret it at all. In fact, to be truthful, I know you're not supposed to say that because it implies that I would not be truthful, which is not me, but I don't know where I would be if I hadn't listened. I don't know where I would be if I chose to ignore that. I can't even actually imagine where I would be if I had chosen to ignore that call. So the reason I bring all this stuff up is because ask yourself in your life, what is it that you're afraid of? Asking someone out on a date, are you afraid of rejection? Starting a company, are you afraid of what? That you won't be successful, you won't make enough money? If when you're working a job that you don't enjoy and you're thinking about going to another job, but you're like, well, this is a decent job, or I don't like the job. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of finding something you really enjoy? Something that, you'll be much happier with? How about in that relationship? You're in that relationship with somebody where it seems like you're putting in all the effort and they're just not. And you're staying because in your mind you're saying, wow, this person has so much potential. Yet they're not putting any work into, reaching that potential. Why are you staying? It's because you're afraid that you won't find better. You're afraid that you're not worth somebody who can and will love you for who you are, and you're willing to accept someone's kind of bare minimum and willing to accept someone who potentially rejects you or doesn't treat you with the value that you have and that you are. Ask yourself those questions, because you see, these are the steps that you start to take to start to begin to understand that the fears that you are experiencing are fears that you are creating. A lot of times we create these fears because we listen to the people around us. We just had a huge experience of that over the last about 4 or 5 years ago, where everybody said one thing, and then nowadays we're finding out that one thing was actually something else. You see, when you start to really sit down and look at fears, and you start to really examine them, do a lot of critical thinking around them, start to look at the things internal that are that potentially are tied to those fears that might be causing you to prevent you from stepping forward and becoming your best version, might be causing you from stepping forward and living your best life. That is when it's time to start considering, maybe this is an illusion. Maybe I should stop listening to the people around me. Maybe I should examine, my ego and check my ego here. Maybe I should start understanding or looking at the things inside of me that make me feel like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I don't have value, and start to understand that is an illusion and a projection based on likely a lot of childhood trauma. And then starting to change that narrative and understand that, hey, you do have value. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of that great job, that great partnership, that amazing life. And when you start changing your thinking, you start overcoming those fears. And when you start overcoming those fears, one by one, you start to see how each one of them gets knocked down. You start to see how each one of them fades away. And then once you start to have those fears fade away, then comes the next logical thing. Then anytime you think you have a fear, you're immediately ready to examine it and go, yeah, no, I don't have a lot of fear of a lot of things. So why does this make me afraid? Is this even a logical thing for me to be scared of? What am I scared of? You see, even on this journey, there are a lot of things I understand now for myself about life. And, I think I have a better understanding for self, even about afterlife. And so even from that perspective, I have much less of a fear of what's to come. And so I'm choosing to live my life in a manner in which I feel, I desire for me without fear. But what say you? How do you feel about that? Do you think that, what I'm presenting to you in terms of your fear is holding you back from your best life? Do you think that examining those fears is a way for you to learn about yourself as well as overcome them? As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I am truly grateful. And until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. Hope you have the most amazing day.